The bill had just been placed on the table, and the entire room seemed to freeze. No one realized that only a few seconds later, a secret that had been hidden for months was about to begin falling apart. Mrs. Helen's birthday celebration was being held at an upscale restaurant in Denver. Laughter filled the private dining room. Glasses of wine were raised in celebration. Familiar stories were told once again. Everything looked exactly like an ordinary family gathering. Ethan Walker sat at the far end of the table. That had always been his place. Not the person who received the most attention, not the person whose voice was heard the most, just the one who always showed up whenever the family needed help. For nearly a year, Ethan's phone had been ringing with calls from his younger brother, Mason. Sometimes it was a broken car. Sometimes it was rent that was due. Other times it was an unexpected debt that needed to be paid immediately. Every time, Ethan sent the money. Quietly. Without complaint. In their parents' eyes, Mason was the child who struggled more. Ethan was the dependable one, the responsible one, the person who could always figure things out. What no one knew was that every month, after helping his brother, Ethan carefully calculated every expense for his elderly aunt, who was recovering from surgery. Then, that moment happened. A waiter accidentally brought the wrong bill to the table. Ethan glanced down. The customer's name was printed clearly at the top, Mason Walker. Below it was a list of expensive meals, premium bottles of wine, and a luxury weekend getaway package for a group of friends. The total was higher than the amount Mason had borrowed from him just a few days earlier. While the rest of the family continued laughing and talking, Ethan sat frozen in silence. For the first time, he allowed himself to ask a question he had been avoiding for months. Did Mason really need help? Or had everyone simply grown accustomed to the idea that Ethan would always be the one paying the bill? Ethan didn't say a word for the rest of the party. He stayed in his seat. He smiled when necessary. He raised his glass and toasted his mother's birthday. But inside, something had changed. That night, after returning to his small apartment, Ethan placed the envelope containing Aunt Margaret's medical bills on the table. Then he opened his banking app. One transfer after another appeared on the screen. Rent, car repairs, credit card payments, living expenses. Month after month, the final number stopped even Ethan in his tracks. More than $9,000. He leaned back in his chair. Not because of the amount, but because, for the first time, he could see the entire picture. While he stayed up late working extra hours to cover his aunt's medical expenses, Mason was enjoying expensive weekend getaways. While Ethan talked himself out of buying a new car, Mason kept posting photos from sports arenas and luxury resorts. The next morning, Ethan did something very simple. He canceled every recurring transfer. No message. No argument. Just a few taps on a screen. By noon, his phone started ringing. Mason called. Then called again. After that, his mother called. Disappointment filled her voice. Your brother is struggling. You can't just abandon your family like this. A few hours later, his father called as well. He said Ethan was overreacting, that family members were supposed to help one another. But what no one knew was that later that same day, Aunt Margaret came to Ethan's apartment. After listening to the entire story, she sat quietly for a long time. Then she slowly revealed a secret the family had spent years trying to forget. This wasn't the first time Mason had borrowed money from relatives. And it wasn't the first time he had never paid it back. In that moment, Ethan finally understood. The problem had never been a few loans. The problem was that everyone had grown comfortable with the idea that he would always be there to absorb the consequences. Just 1 week later, everything began to crack. At first, Mason still believed Ethan would change his mind. He kept sending messages. He kept calling. His tone shifted from anger to blame, then from blame to desperate pleading. But for the first time in years, Ethan did not send another dollar. Then the bills started coming due. The credit cards were nearly maxed out. The rent remained unpaid. Suddenly, those carefree weekend outings became far more expensive than Mason had expected. Meanwhile, Ethan continued living his life. He went to work. He took care of Aunt Margaret. He paid the remaining medical expenses that still needed attention. One weekend morning, the doorbell rang. His father was standing outside. He stepped into the apartment looking more tired than Ethan had ever seen him. His eyes drifted toward the stack of medical files piled across the table. Bills, prescriptions, payments Ethan had never mentioned to anyone. The silence lingered. For the first time, his father was seeing a part of Ethan's life the family had never truly paid attention to. He sat down. When he finally spoke, his voice was slower than usual. "I didn't know you were carrying this much." Ethan gave a faint smile. Not a bitter one. Just the smile of someone who had been exhausted for far too long. "I told you before." Nobody listened. The words left his father speechless. He remembered the countless times Ethan had quietly stepped in to help the family. He remembered how everyone had treated those sacrifices as something ordinary. In that moment, he finally understood. The son, everyone believed was the strongest, had been carrying the heaviest burden all along. A few days later his father sat down with Mason. For the first time, he refused to take his younger son's side. As for Ethan, he did not feel victorious. There was no satisfaction. No revenge. Only a sense of peace he had not felt in years. Because sometimes the greatest act of strength is not continuing to sacrifice. It is finding the courage to say that enough is enough.